Hello and welcome back to the Dougie Critchley Football YouTube channel. As you can see, I am not in my bedroom. I am in a studio in West London because this is the first episode of The Truth on my YouTube channel. This is a podcast that I do with Sam Tighe, football journalist, and Jack Collins, football journalist as well. We did it for the entirety of last season, but it is now coming out in video form too. You can find the audio form on the Ranks FC podcast platform, but the video will now be dropping every Friday on my YouTube channel. You can watch the video here, of course. It is a podcast being filmed, so it might sound and look a bit podcasty at points, but I hope you enjoy it. On with the video.
Dougie.
Sam.
Newcastle fans had a wild ride this summer, and while some remain down on it all, others think their team have come out the other side stronger. Is that true? Or is that copium? Let's talk it through. Yes, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Truth. I'm your host, Sam Tighe. Joining me is my friend and co-host Dougie Critchley. Hello, Dougie.
Hello, Sam. Season 2, Episode 2. Very pumped.
Yeah, I'm actually keeping track of the episodes this year because you did last year.
I did,
but
yeah.
by the time I realised you were doing it, we were about 15 episodes and it was too late. I'm on top of this.
Good.
I know exactly where we are. Season 2, Episode 2. Last week was Episode 1.
Indeed, that's how it works.
Sat opposite is our overlord, Jack Collins. Hello, Jack.
Hello, Sam. How you doing?
I'm very well. I'm exhausted. Up at 6 with the baby. In and out of the city. In and out of the city again. Tube strike in London causing havoc. But my goodness me, would I move mountains to sit at this table with you two.
Exactly. Well, you have as well. Respect, as they say, as Jose would say.
Respect. Right, we're coming out of the first international break of the season. Many get very irritated that after 3, or in some leagues' cases, just 2 games, momentum is immediately broken up and we stop for internationals. And it is frustrating. You get into that rhythm of the new season, especially off the back of a summer with no football. If it's an international tournament summer, maybe it's less of a thing. But it is quite annoying. But I hope you guys used the time wisely. I hope you put football on ice. Mm-hmm. I hope you spent some nice time in the last knockings of summer sun. I hope you went and spoke to your families.
Did a bit of that.
For a little bit. Remembered your wives, girlfriends and children's names, all that stuff.
I hope you didn't watch Ireland lose 2-1 to Armenia.
That's actually the first thing on the docket here. I think it's worth touching on.
It is, definitely.
It's worth touching on. Ireland lost 2-1 to Armenia. So I had a little... Jack is like giggling, embarrassed giggling.
I've been asked to talk about this in like 3 things in a row today, and every time it's like, it's the most depressing thing on earth.
Does it make any more sense at 20-8 than it did
you don't have
last night?
Look, you don't have to speak. I'll do it.
Good.
I just did a little bit scoping around for some reaction. I didn't want to really rub Jack's nose in it, but I did have a little scope round. Dan McDonnell and Aidan Fitzmaurice of the Irish Independent did a post-match video from the stadium and claimed there were 0 positives to take. And on BBC Sports, Lauren McCann asked, "Is this the worst result in the Republic of Ireland's history?" She did a good job of naming all of the other atrocities and sort of settled on the idea that, yeah, this was really bad. So despite what I said 1 minute ago, Jack, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the worst result in the Republic of Ireland's history was losing 2-0 to England when Declan Rice and Jack Grealish scored.
Definitely the most painful.
If I'm being perfectly honest. But yeah, I think in the context that we've had some bad results. We lost to Cyprus. That was pretty tough. We got battered by Luxembourg in one game. That was rough. But in terms of actual ruining qualification in the second game, after fighting back really well to get a point against Hungary, and you're looking at that group and saying, okay, Portugal are going to win the group, Hungary and Ireland, then Armenia, and after going and getting that point and fighting back to secure a point against Hungary that kept things alive, to go and lose in Yerevan and just, that's it. It's like Ireland just will not be at the World Cup in 2026. It's done, finished. Good night, goodbye. God bless.
And it's the big World Cup as well. They expanded it specifically to give Ireland a better chance.
Well, I think the big thing and the huge loss for America is obviously that we will not get the New Jersey derby that we had in '94 between Ireland and Italy. And so, look, the World Cup will be less rich for not having Ireland there, but I guarantee you they won't be.
Yeah, okay, never mind. Well, on the flip side, England delivered one of the best performances we've come up with as a nation for, I actually don't know how far this stretches back, because England, generally speaking, all right, we've won a lot of games recently. We've obviously reached 2 Euros finals, not bad. We don't play particularly well most of the time. This was a genuinely very good, very dominant performance against Serbia. 5-0, 4-0 at the point Nikola Milenkovic was wrongly sent off. So the damage was done even before the harsh red card. Ziggy, did you see it? Did you pick through the goals? And
I was watching it. I was kind of half watching it whilst editing a video, but it was super impressive, particularly from the players that are more sort of on the fringes, let's say. Like Elliot Anderson, pretty new to international football, was playing this controlling role really, really effectively.
Excellent.
Letting Declan Rice push on. Morgan Rogers in the 10 role as well, just continues to take every step forward that you could as an international and club footballer and just not take a backward step whatsoever. And then Noni Madueke, who I think started the season really, really well. And I'm so pleased for him as well, because there was that ridiculous petition when he signed for Arsenal from Arsenal fans claiming that they didn't want him as a signing, which you can want. You can say who you want online. You can, say you want Rodrigo. You can say what you want Rafa Leao instead, but you don't create a petition against a player's signing for your club. So that was a really poor move from the subsection of Arsenal fans that were involved in that, let's say. And then Ezri Konsa and Mark Guehi scoring their first international goals. There were so many positives. And I've seen a lot of chat online in the last 24 hours being like, oh, is this a problem that Rogers and Madueke and Elliot Anderson look so good in an international shirt? Absolutely not.
No way.
It's great to have such good depth in attacking areas and midfield areas. The area I'm most concerned about is the central defence. With Colwell injured, with Stones really struggling to stay fit, it really does feel like England's centre-back options really do rest on Mark Guehi and Ezri Konsa, who 12 months ago you probably wouldn't have said this going into a World Cup year, just being under 12 months away. So overall, lots of positives.
Loads of positives. On the centre-backs, I mean, it's not the star-studded cast that England are used to. Like, even when we were poor as a team, we had some incredible centre-backs. You go back to the start of my football watching, but Sol Campbell, Rio Ferdinand, John Terry, all these guys. It was like, who do we pick between these guys? And now we might be scratching around a bit. But Mark Guehi and Ezri Konsa have played very well for England every time they've put on the shirt. So I suppose we can just take that as the positive.
Absolutely.
Elliot Anderson, by the way, very, very good in a very drab performance against Andorra, and then really good here as well. You know how we've all been clamouring for Adam Wharton to play for England, and he keeps getting injured at the wrong time. Well, Elliot Anderson has possibly just stolen in at the right time here, in a way that Madueke has kind of stolen in on Saka as well, a little bit, just because Saka, I don't think, has even played for Tuchel yet, or barely, because he keeps getting injured at the wrong time. As I was watching Anderson against Serbia, I was reminded of that gif of that raccoon that picks up that big block of candy floss and then drops it in the puddle, and it disintegrates, and it sort of wades through the puddle wondering where its food's gone. Those are your Adam Wharton England stocks dissolving in a puddle as Elliot Anderson runs the show against, all right, not the best competition, but
it was impressive.
God, he was
It was
good.
impressive. But I'm not writing off Adam Wharton whatsoever. I'm a little bit annoyed for his sake that Kobbie Mainoo didn't get a loan move as well, because you'd really like Kobbie Mainoo to be competing amongst that section as well. There's rumours that Real Madrid were considering a move for Adam Wharton this summer, which is pretty nuts. But Elliot Anderson feels like, no matter how this season goes with Forest as well, but there'll be so many big clubs sniffing around him as well, because he can play in so many different styles as well. And actually, Ange Postecoglou's arrival at Nottingham Forest as well, which is another big talk of this international break. I think that could really favour Anderson as well.
Yes, I think so. Anderson is just about 1,000 times better than I ever thought. It's got to follow me to the grave. There's a few footballers you just get dead wrong, and Anderson was certainly one of them. I've got a stat to finish us off here. Across England's 5 World Cup qualifiers under Thomas Tuchel, they have conceded just 1 shot on target. That was in the first game against Latvia. So since March the 24th, England have not conceded a single shot on target. That is Tuchel ball. Speaking of Latvia, I'm going there this weekend.
Of course, it's your lads' trip.
Basically put that stat in to segue into me talking about going to Latvia. So if you're listening to this on Friday, Saturday or Sunday, which you probably are, I am in Latvia right now. I have tickets to Riga FC against Auda in the Latvian Higher League, or for sponsorship purposes, the TonyBet Versliga.
Saturday, 3 p.m?
I actually don't know yet. I'll have to check. But I'm starting to... I just have a little think on the way here. Is this going to be my most hipster game ever? And Dukla Prague Bohemians 1905 gives it a run. But I think Riga versus Auda, or Orda, I don't know how to say it. This could be it.
This is very Jack Collins.
But you are there. So, like, it's not like you've travelled for it. I do think the most hipster thing we've ever done was you and I travelling to the Conference League final when it was in Albania to go and see Roma against
Just because we wanted to go?
Just because we wanted to
No
go.
one told us to go. No one asked us to go.
We just went. We just went. We just decided we were going, and that was that, via Genoa.
That was so good.
We had a great time.
The flights to Albania were either difficult or expensive, but if you flew to Genoa
It was like
first,
19 quid each or something like that, and
good.
then 19 quid to fly to Albania. So we flew
Mourinho's
to,
final high, amazing.
We flew to Genoa, stayed over the night in a very sketchy spot, and then did the rest of the leg to Albania the next day.
I bet Feyenoord fans are absolutely nuts as well.
it was a lot of fun. Both sets of fans were quite nuts, and it was loads of fun.
The final fans
I've
were having a day rave, a festival,
Yeah.
in a park.
I've been to Riga FC.
Yeah?
Like, naturally.
Of course you have,
obviously.
I have seen Riga FC play before, so you were in for an absolute treat. That's
Yeah,
all
is
I
it
can
good?
say. Yeah, I had a great time.
Superb.
Great
All
time.
right, the rest of it.
Stay on the right side of the law, because I've also been to Riga and they do not like Brits because of the stag do culture. So be careful.
We're not on a stag do. I
What,
want
no?
that on the record in case
Just
the
on a
police,
football trip.
the police are listening. Anyway, our topic today is not Latvian football, although easily it could be, clearly. It's also not the brilliance of Tuchel's England. It's also not the consistently hilarious failings of the Irish national team, as much as I would like it to be the topic for the day. It is Newcastle United. Doogie, the floor is yours. Please introduce our topic.
Yeah, this is a really interesting one because Newcastle had probably the most talked about summer in the Premier League. I think it's fair to say.
Apart from Liverpool.
Maybe Liverpool.
It's linked, isn't it?
Well, exactly. It's very much linked. And Arsenal also garnered a lot of headlines. Chelsea always do as well. But Newcastle, first half of the transfer window, very much everyone laughing at them. Can't sign a player. Delap, João Pedro, Cunha. The list
James
goes
Trafford.
on. James Trafford.
It was a long list.
It was a long list. And it was all very public. And everyone was enjoying laughing them, particularly on my section of Sunderland Twitter. But before we get into this as well, I just want to clarify that I do not hate Newcastle, despite what people watching this might think and listening to this might think. Because I didn't grow up in the Sunderland area, I dislike Newcastle, but I don't have the same level of hatred for them as you probably do or don't with Birmingham, I would have thought. You need to kind of be from the area to really hate your rival, I think.
don't hate them as much as my dad does. Should we put it that way?
There we have it. There we have it. But it is worth talking about where Newcastle's summer leaves them because they had, by all accounts, a pretty good 24-25. They finished fifth with 66 points. That was their second best points tally since 2002-03. That was only topped in 22-23, confusingly, when they finished fourth with 71 points. They had a really good, solid season all round. I know they only finished above Aston Villa on goal difference in the end, but I think they did probably deserve that spot. I think across the entire season in terms of level of performance, I think they probably did deserve it. They got some brilliant results as well. They beat Spurs twice. They beat Arsenal. They beat Forest twice. They beat Villa. They beat Man United home and away, which admittedly last season wasn't that much of an achievement. They also beat Chelsea. They lost 1-0 against Arsenal and Everton in their final two games, but they still qualified ahead of Villa on goal difference.
They also won a cup.
Well, this is where I was getting to. Because this was the big moment of their season. They had a really tough run as well. They beat Chelsea, they beat Brentford, they then beat Arsenal home and away in a moment that Arsenal had a couple of injuries going into that, but still it was seen as Arteta finally getting his hands on another piece of silverware with this kind of new team after that first trophy with the FA Cup came in that first year with that kind of old style Emery side. But they ended up beating Liverpool quite comfortably in the final. I was coming back from a stag do in Newcastle. I bumped into loads of Newcastle fans that weekend and told them, you're going to lose tomorrow. And they said, no, we're going to win. And they won. They won comfortably.
They were amazing.
First trophy in 70 years. So that's kind of the scene set for going into this summer, Sam. And we mentioned, where they've ended up in terms of a lot of players initially rejecting them, but they lost some key players, but crazy amounts of incomings too.
Yeah, there was a lot going on. I think we'll talk about the outgoings first, and then we'll move to the incomings. And I would like to let you list off all the transfers because I know it's your favourite activity. So we'll start with Isak. I'll cover Isak because no one really needs to hear this again, but we just have to acknowledge the fact that he left. It was a conversation that effectively cast a shadow over Newcastle all through the back half of last season, all the way back to March. We did a podcast called Can Newcastle United Hold On to Alexander Isak on March the 21st. So this was just after the Carabao Cup win, and we were basically saying, is this enough? The first trophy in so many years, is this going to be enough?
I don't remember that podcast at all. What was our verdict?
Oh, that's good to know.
I've completely blanked that from my mind.
Okay, so luckily I did write it down. Our gut feeling collectively was that no, he would not leave because the sheer cost of a deal would be prohibitive. So we were basically half right.
Yeah.
We also guessed the price at the end of the episode.
Did we?
Yeah. And if you believe Newcastle, because Newcastle and Liverpool are saying it's a different fee.
Oh, I haven't seen this, right? I thought it was one.
It's supposed to. It's either 125 million pounds or 130 million pounds. Newcastle, there's different terminology flying around. Liverpool say it's a British record, 125 million pounds. That is what they've briefed journalists. Newcastle have said that it is worth 130 million pounds. Now, I don't know what that means. Does it mean that Isak gave up a loyalty bonus? Did he contribute some money towards the deal in the way that we know Nicholas Jackson and his agent paid roughly 3 million euros towards the loan fee to get him to Bayern? These are all possibilities. I don't have the answers. I just get annoyed when they don't all say the same thing. Anyway, if Newcastle were right, Jack was bang on. He said 130 million.
Really?
If it's 125, then you're joint winners because you went for 120, so you're 5 million off either way. I tried to be clever. I said 131, so that I would be right if it was north of 130.
You did the Luis Suarez.
And I was wrong. I was the most wrong. So I got what I deserved. But yeah, anyway, look, it took all summer. We talked about it all summer. It took a player strike. It took a weird statement after being included in the Team of the Year, a handful of accusations of lies from each side, and at least 2 British record bids. But it got done. Isak signed for Liverpool on the final day. He was not the only player to leave. So let's park Isak for a second and talk about the other ones, because there were 3 or 4 notable ones going out the exit door. Probably 3.
Yeah, I mean, one of the less notable ones was Lloyd Kelly.
I've got him in notable.
Oh, okay. Well, he's joined Juventus.
Poor Lloyd.
I don't think Juventus fans were necessarily delighted about it, but it was an obligation to buy on the back of a loan.
Isn't it just? Can I just say here? Right. This £15 million fee for Lloyd Kelly in a vacuum is whatever, it's fine. 6 months before this loan deal was struck, Juventus sold Dean Hyson for £15 million. If you're a Juve fan, you're not tearing your hair out here.
Absolutely.
Good
I think
Lord.
They've sold so many players in the last couple of seasons that could really do a job for them. Sule, Fagioli, etc. It does feel like that sort of Primavera squad is really being made way to bring in, well, up until this summer, I would say, quite a few average players. And Lloyd Kelly, Juve fans weren't delighted with that. He wasn't the only departure, though. Sean Longstaff also left for Leeds. I actually think Sean Longstaff really built a fairly solid Newcastle career by the end of it, to be honest. His final 18 months there was pretty good. I mean, last season he ranked 16th for league minutes, but the previous 2 seasons he played 30 and 28 league games. Dubravka left for Burnley. Solid servant for Newcastle, but he's 36 years old.
Well, he nearly left in January. He had his bags packed for Saudi Arabia, didn't he? But then Nick Pope got an injury, so he stuck around and covered the gaps, which was quite valiant of him, really, I think, ultimately.
Sure.
He has been a good servant for them. Undisclosed fee for that one, but probably like $1 million or $2 million.
I wouldn't have thought a lot.
Gone to Burnley, yeah, as you say, at 35, so it's not going to be much.
And then what turned out to be quite a crucial outgoing was actually Callum Wilson leaving on a free, because it suddenly left Newcastle in a situation where they kind of needed 2 strikers with not very many weeks left of the window. Callum Wilson hadn't been fit for Newcastle for a long time. He hadn't scored many goals for Newcastle for a long time. But again, when Isak first arrived, people don't really remember that actually Wilson played significantly more and played more and scored more than Isak in his first season as well. So he definitely had a pretty solid time on Tyneside. And Jamal Lewis also left. He made 31 appearances in 5 years at the club. So not a key exit there.
That one didn't quite go to plan. Good time to say goodbye to Sean Longstaff. 15 million to Leeds, had fallen off the picture a little bit. And this season, with Jacob Ramsey in, and we'll talk about him more in a moment, but he can play the central midfield role. Lewis Miley back to fitness. There wasn't really a route to minutes, was there, for Longstaff? So goodbye to him. Wilson, it was an interesting and surprisingly key domino, because it did put them in a situation where they had no strikers. And it would have changed the picture completely if they weren't constantly recruiting 2 and worried about, we could sell Isak, but that means we need 2, that sort of thing. So it actually was, it turned out, just releasing a player on a free transfer who'd been pretty injury ridden turned out to be one of the summer's most important moves. It's created 3 months of absolute carnage. It's really amazing. Right, on to incomings. Take it away.
Aaron Ramsdale, first of all. He's now played Premier League football for Bournemouth, Sheffield United, Arsenal, Southampton, and now joins Newcastle. I think it was after the Trafford move fell through, if memory serves me right. I think James Trafford probably had a better chance of immediately usurping Nick Pope, but having Ramsdale, having Pope on your books, two very different style of goalkeepers. I actually think Aaron Ramsdale is kind of unfairly maligned, predominantly because he did that podcast with Ian Wright where he said he struggles to focus for 90 minutes and likes to get involved with the crowd to kind of G himself up, which is probably not the best thing for a goalkeeper to say publicly, but he has said it.
Gigi Buffon wouldn't say that, would he?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But he's only 27 years old. Pope's 33. Maybe he'll become Newcastle number one, but either way, he's in a good position to sort of maintain his challenge for England.
I liked this move because he's good with his feet. And he played well last season for Southampton. Southampton fans were really sorry to see him go. They were hoping he would stay. I mean, it's only on loan. It could change, but there's clearly admiration from Eddie Howe here. Otherwise, they wouldn't have taken him in, and we'll see what happens. So Ramsdale's better than people think,
definitely.
And Nick Pope's inability to pass the ball is a stylistic restriction. So I'm expecting Ramsdale to usurp Pope at some point in the next 2 to 3 months.
I'd probably agree with that. Malick Thiaw also arrived from Milan. This was their first sort of major signing of the summer after, as we talked about at the start, sort of weeks of missing out on key targets. 24-year-old German, came through at Schalke, then spent 3 seasons at Milan. There was a lot of Milan fans on Twitter who I always think are quite a bitter lot sometimes. I remember when Hakan Çalhanoğlu joined into Milan and they were sort of laughing at the deal.
I mean, to be fair, contextually speaking, I do kind of understand why they were a bit like, good luck with him.
Well,
it hadn't worked out.
I think he was better at Milan than people gave him credit for. But either way, I do take your point. No one really saw him turning into this deep-lying amazing passing number 6.
Ridiculous transformation.
Exactly. But I saw a lot of Milan fans on Twitter being like, "I'll see you later, Malick Thiaw. We'll take that, whatever it was, £30 million in the end."
33 million, I think, in the end.
Yeah, because he wasn't a key centre-back, but they kind of split minutes between Gabbia, Pavlovic, Tomori and Malick Thiaw last year. He actually ended up playing 300 more minutes than Tomori. He's a pretty solid on-the-ball passer. I don't think he's necessarily going to take Fabian Schär's position immediately, but long-term, they need to look beyond Fabian Schär, and then Botman and Thiaw moving forward. Does feel like a fairly solid duo.
They just needed another player because Botman's fitness is so spotty these days, and they've got obviously the midweeks and the European games. They can't really carry 3 if one of them is Botman, because sometimes he comes off after half a game because he's had a flare-up, and they have to be really careful with him. So, look, to balance the argument there, like I know someone that works at Milan recruitment department, and they were really sorry to see him go at club level. They were like, look, he's really good. We think he's excellent. But this tells you about the financial chasm that we deal with in world football. Milan genuinely considered this deal, 34 million pounds, too good to pass up. For a Premier League club, you're getting very little south of 25 million that's usable to you these days. So Milan and Newcastle here looking at Newcastle, that's a minimum price for a player that could play for Newcastle. Milan saw it as a payday they could not resist.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't want to paint out that all Milan fans are bitter when their players leave, because I do remember when Tonali left, they went, wow, they've signed a really, really top player there. But I'm sort of moving through their window, as it were, and I think the next to sign was Anthony Elanga. Was a sort of a star at Man United is a massive exaggeration. Wasn't kind of wanted at Man United at the end, but did actually have a really good period under Ralph Rangnick.
In no way
probably the only player that ever looked decent under Ralph Rangnick, I would say, at Man United. Then joins Forest.
Andreas Pereira, star at Manchester United.
Okay, that was the wrong use of a word. But I do think that his spell under Ralph Rangnick in that chaos period where everyone was falling out deserves a little bit more respect than it got. But
I think that's fair.
Moves to Forest in 2023. Sort of a okay first season. But then last season in the league, 6 goals and 11 assists. Absolutely superb on the break. £55 million move to Newcastle this summer. Did feel like quite a lot for a player that was signed for £15 million 2 years ago. But then you saw the other fees flying around for wingers that have a unique selling point, but maybe, Elanga's speed on the break, etc. My issue with this deal was I thought he's very similar stylistically to Jacob Murphy, and maybe a more sort of technically minded, maybe a more of a sort of driver infield like a Takefusa Kubo or someone would be a nice alternative to Jacob Murphy. But if you're going for Gordon, Barnes, Elanga swapping, alternating all across the pitch in transition with Wissa as well, who subsequently signed, that's pretty exciting going forward.
Yeah, I don't really have an issue with this deal, to be honest with you. I think Elanga's great. Probably another one that I slept on a little bit to start with, and then suddenly realised at some point last year, oh my God, he's that fast. He's that fast. He's one of the fastest 5 players in the league.
That goal against Man United was crazy.
Yeah, it's just ridiculous. So, look, speed costs. That kind of speed, it just add 10 million. So if you thought Elanga was like a roughly £40 million winger, which you probably would thought him in that range. Sorry, but he's too fast for that, so he costs 50. That's literally the way it works.
If speed sells, then I have an Adama Traore that I can sell you.
Nuno is interested. Okay,
was interested.
He's still interested. When he gets his next job, Nuno will be interested in that. Cool. I don't really have an issue with that, especially when the other deals started rolling in all around the lowest any of these guys transferred for before Harvey Elliott was 48 million, which was Gittins, and that was still tipping into the 50s. So in the end, it looked about par for the course.
Yeah. And next one, which only feels right for you to cover, is Jacob Ramsey. Sad times.
Why do I have to cover it?
Well, he came from your club. I'm sure you loved him as a player.
Oh, yeah, it was really sad. I mean, look, seemingly every football club has to go through this at the moment.
He's your Elliot Anderson.
Yeah, big time. It's difficult. Ramsey, we know he can be very good, but what makes this a little easier to take is that for the last 2 years, we haven't seen the best of Jacob Ramsey due to injuries. And it looked like after the initial spurt under Unai Emery, he was looking really, really good in that left mid role. He then went to the England under-21 Euros and they won the tournament, so he's got a winner's medal. But he fractured a metatarsal in like the second or third game, which gave him a delayed start to the season, and he's just never really caught up. He is an amazing tactical fit for Eddie Howe. He is exactly what Howe wants. Left centre mid, box-to-box number 8, or could play left wing. He's basically Joe Willock times 2. And if Newcastle are trying to lift the floor of their squad, then Ramsey is it. And £39 million plus 3. I think everybody was like, all right, that'll do.
Yeah, I think fair enough. And also they did need to look at their sort of midfield depth because last year Bruno Guimaraes started all 38 league games. Joe Linton started 29, Tonali 28. They've obviously got the Champions League. They've got a fairly challenging Champions League draw as well. So now to have Willock, Ramsey and Lewis Miley, who a lot of Newcastle fans are really hot on, that's pretty good depth and all feel like a really good stylistic fit there as well. Then comes the final week of the window.
Here we go.
Who do we bring in with the Alexander Isak money? We don't really want to lose Isak, but we can't really turn down the money and he's throwing his toys out the pram. We've got to sell him. We need 2 players in. Yoanne Wissa arrives from Brentford, £45 million fee. He just turned 29 at the beginning.
45.
I thought it was 45.
Well, we've got contrasting ideas on this. Brentford claim it is a £55 million deal fixed.
Okay.
Newcastle say it's a £50 million rising to 55.
Well, either way, it's not 45.
Again, can someone just stop lying? Like, please, this is ridiculous. We just need the information.
We just need the information. We won't judge it too harshly. But yeah, turned 29 earlier this month, so it doesn't feel like a long-term signing. He only had 1 year left on his contract. But given who they eventually brought in as their other striking signing, I think signing someone with a lot of Premier League experience felt like a really sensible addition. And he spent 4 years at Brentford now after joining from Lorient. And his league goal tally has gone 7-7-12. And last year, 19. His XG per 90 has risen every season as well. He got the same amount of shots on target last year as Alexander Isak, which is pretty impressive given he was playing for a Brentford side that were up and down at various points last year.
More non-penalty goals than Isak.
Absolutely. And his XG last year, total XG 18.5, only topped by Salah, Haaland and Isak. And again, doesn't take penalties. And actually, I watched some compilations of his season at Brentford last year, and some of the finishing is really, really smart, really, really astute. He can run on to play very effectively. He can link up with others really effectively. This feels like a very good use of money. And I was, pleased to see this get done in the end. There was a certain irony in Newcastle fans complaining about Isak's action when Wissa did pretty much the same thing at Brentford. But putting that aside, given who they eventually signed towards the end of the window, this one made a lot of sense, I thought, Sam.
This is quickly turning into a list of players I have previously underestimated because I also did the same thing with Yoanne Wissa. I mean, admittedly, he's clearly got an awful lot better over the last 4 years. So there's plenty of growth there. And he's done it from basically age 25 to 29, which isn't your usual track. And we love a late bloomer.
We do.
You know, these guys are actually what sometimes carry they carry the best stories in football. You know, someone like Jamie Vardy, for example, is what he is in part because what the hell was he doing before the age of 25?
Seru Girassi.
For sure. They're brilliant. So, look, it's a lot of money. This is, for a 29-year-old, this is a lot of money. All the other players that were moving in this category, this bracket of price, they're like 24. They're 23. They're 22. Only Man United really stepped above in terms of the age range with Cunha and Mbeumo, who are sort of tipping towards 26. This is another step again, but this is what happens when you are on the last day of the window and you haven't made your move yet. Fair play, they tried to sign about 6 other players. It just didn't happen. And I think I like this more than £60 million on Jurgen Strand Larsen, which was also the one in the offing. Like, I really didn't like that one. I'm not sure he's a £60 million player. Not to say I think Wissa's a 55 million, but I suppose you can't really talk about Wissa without also then noting that he wasn't brought in alone.
There is a runway, though, I think is different on Wissa and Strand Larsen. I think Strand Larsen has a load of scope to grow. I think he's a really, really clever all-round number 9 with a real potential to go on and kick on and maybe not reach world-class status. I think that's probably too much of a stretch, but like I really, really like Strand Larsen. If I was picking between these two and there was 5 million in the difference, I would have signed Strand Larsen. 100%. 100%.
What about taking into account what Eddie Howe wants in terms of like that directness, that aggression, that speed?
Well, the only thing I would say is that, and you're going to come onto it, I know, about the kind of dovetailing now between potentially playing 2 number 9s, in inverted commas, next to each other. And I think that might be the thing that changes that dynamic. But if it was just a straight choice, if you'd offered me Yoanne Wissa or Jurgen Strand Larsen, I would have signed Strand Larsen every single day of the week.
Okay, there you go.
Fair enough.
Well, Wissa wasn't the only one signed.
No, there was a bomber towards the end of the window. A really exciting deal that I, so often with the plethora of transfer information and endless tweets about the same player for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we all know who we're talking about. It's quite nice when one comes out of the absolute left field and just kind of takes the world by surprise. And Nick Woltemade to Newcastle was definitely one of those. I remember coming into this studio in about January, February, being like, "You guys, have you guys watched a bit of Nick Woltemade? There's this really unique player," because the first time you see him, you're like, "Who the hell is this?" Like, he's so bizarre to look at. He is 6'6", but he has this unbelievable touch. He's very, very good with his feet in tight spaces. He does remind me, and I'm not saying he's as good as this player, but if you watch clips of Zlatan at Ajax, there are similarities in the way they move and the way they manipulate the ball and their kind of agility.
He's not as acrobatic, though, is he?
Not as acrobatic. No, definitely not. And not as quick, I don't think, either.
He's nowhere near as fast. But so another comp that I've seen floating around, which I think is a good one, is Berbatov with a mustache. Nice. And by comp I've seen floating around, I mean, that's what I call him. Oversized Berbatov with a mustache.
Crouchy. There's a little bit of crouchy about it.
He's too beefy, I guess. But then
but like, it's the whole big man, but actually probably better with his feet than he is at anything else.
Yeah.
Like that comparison I like.
Yeah. Berbatov, crouch. Yeah. Okay. Well, he's Nick Woltemade. He's no one else.
Nicknamed Volta Messi by some of his Germany teammates, which is exciting. I mean, there's been loads of Messi-esque players supposedly coming through. No one's really obviously got anywhere close, but this is a guy that's had a meteoric rise. He's 23 years old now, but he signed from Stuttgart from Werder Bremen on a free last summer, which is absolutely nuts. And he was largely a bench option, sub option until the second half of the season, around sort of December time. But he finished with 11 goals and 2 assists in his final 21 league games. He scored in every round of the DFB Pokal, which Stuttgart won. He then goes to the under-21 Euros. He gets 6 goals and 3 assists. Looks like he's far too good for that level as Germany reach the final and eventually lose to Lee Carsley's England.
Hello.
And there is so much to like about his game. And he's a nice sort of diverse pick from Yoane Wissa as well, who's a much more natural number 9, bit more of a line stretcher. And I don't think Woltemade is necessarily going to start initially, but I think there is the potential that they could play together. I think it gives you a lot of tactical flexibility. And for years, people have said, what is the difference maker when a side can sort of match Newcastle's physicality and aren't going to get pressed off the ball? And Woltemade, if we give him a bit of time, because he has joined very, very late in the window, I think could be a nice difference maker.
So I think my key question here is, and I'll sit there all day and say he's a lovely, unique, interesting, wonderful player. My question is, like, genuinely, can he play up front?
By himself?
By himself.
I think he probably can. It's difficult in the Premier League. Like, a lot of the clips you see him are, and he's kind of, yes, he is got amazing feet, but he does have a burst to kind of push away a defender. The defenders in the Premier League are just so much more physical than those in the Bundesliga. They're generally quicker. There's less space to operate in. We have seen far more experienced players with many more seasons under their belt in the Bundesliga really struggle with the initial adaptation to the Premier League. Yeah. And I hate the phrase Bundesliga tax, but there's a kind of...
We'll do an episode on that soon. Don't worry.
There's a correlation in some ways in that you see players like Nkunku and Timo Werner, and these are different style of players.
And the player that Nick Woltemade has named as the player that he models himself on. Kai
Havertz, and even Florian Wirtz has not necessarily lit it up in the first 3 games, and it is only 3 games before all the Liverpool fans get angry with me. Woltemade has 1 season of really top level, and it's really only 6 months of starting regularly. It is a bit of a gamble, but they were in a position where they kind of had to take a gamble, and there was a reason that Bayern Munich was so desperate to sign him earlier on in the summer as well. And look, it is a risk, but there are so many raw ingredients there that make me think that this could be something quite different in the Premier League and quite exciting, and I don't want to write it off before it's even got a chance to blossom.
Did you watch the Germany game against Northern Ireland?
No,
I did not.
So Germany played against Northern Ireland, and in the first game against Slovakia, Germany were dreadful, right? And it was Woltemade with Wirtz on the left and Gnabry on the right, and it didn't really work because everyone was trying to occupy the same space, and Goretzka was trying to get forward from the midfield. None of it really worked. And then in the second game against Northern Ireland, they played with Woltemade up front. They played with Wirtz in the 10, and the two of them were a little bit in each other's way at times, but they were dropping into the same space. And they played Jamie Leveling on one side of it, who we know one obviously has a relationship with Woltemade from Stuttgart, and Gnabry on the other. And Germany went, drop him in and drop it over the back and let these two run onto it. And Gnabry scores really early on, and Leveling gets in behind over and over again. And I'm watching that going, Anthony Elanga, Anthony Gordon, that has the potential to be really quite special. I think if they can make that stick. Now, again, I take your point, and there's no guarantee that the translation works to the Premier League. I think it is a huge gamble and a very expensive gamble. But if they can get that to stick and they can get that to work, Woltemade dropping in and then allowing 2 wingers who want to get in behind to run in there and kind of occupy that space, there is a potential that that's quite special, I think.
Yes. So you said it's expensive there. We didn't actually say the price, but it looks like £65 million rising up to into the 70s. It's a club record deal on a player who certainly carries question marks and certainly does feel like, even to those who love him, like you will agree, it's a bit of a risk. Yeah. And there's a couple of things I want to pick out here. So first of all, some physical data, which has done the rounds. It's courtesy of Gradient, who are, for those of the US persuasion, that's basically PFF, but for soccer. They track physical data, and they have not... Well, the physical data has not reflected quite so well on Woltemade. I think you can probably understand why. He's a bit slow and doesn't commit to too many sprints. That's where he rates quite lowly. So sprint count, start with that, 16.57 sprints per 90, which means probably nothing to you. But what does mean something to you is that would be lower than every centre-forward who played in the Premier League last season on a per 90 basis.
Wow.
For context, Ekitike, 21.5, and Isak, 22.3. So 16.5 is quite a lot lower. The max speed. So Woltemade's max speed, which was calculated here by taking his 5 fastest games and averaging out those 5, so it wasn't just the best sprint he ever did, he clocked in at 31.44 kilometres an hour. The average for a Premier League centre-forward last season was 33.14, and of all the Premier League centre-forwards last year, Woltemade was only quicker than Füllkrug and Marino. Marino's not actually a centre-forward. So he's right at the bottom of the scale in terms of those speed and sprinting, which has raised a few alarm bells around, with the general intensity of the league. And we saw with a lot of players, even someone like Timo Werner, but especially like Kai Havertz, like the intensity and the sprinting and the stop-start nature of it did cause quite a lot of problems. And if I remember correctly for those guys, it caused a few injuries as well. It was very, very intense. So if Woltemade tries to adapt to that, then he might have a few physical issues. But if he doesn't, he might kind of get swarmed and swamped. And that's one thing that people have certainly brought up as a bit of an issue, which I think is probably fair enough. The other issue is, you might not paint this as an issue, but I don't think he actually profiles particularly well for Eddie Howe's striker right now. So the question is, as Jack puts forward, does he move into more of a false 9 role? Do those wingers go in over the top? And do we gradually move to that point? And does Eddie Howe change the way his centre-forward works? Or is Eddie Howe about to run it back to Bournemouth? play a 4-4-1-1? Is he locking himself in to play Woltemade as a 10 with Wissa as a stretching forward? And if not, Anthony Gordon as a stretching number 9, because he can certainly do that. Definitely. And he can certainly run in behind defences. Is it Wissa and Gordon as strikers and Woltemade is a 10? Are they getting to the point now where, and you referenced it earlier, like Newcastle's physicality in midfield is quite fierce, but there are definitely games that you're like, Joelinton, Tonali and Bruno seems a bit overkill, mate. Right, you've already won the territory. You've already won this battle. What you're lacking is a bit of creativity, and we probably saw it against Leeds not so long ago. So Jacob Ramsey is one step forward in that sense, or is Joelinton going to maybe step out of those situations, and are they going to try and give Woltemade the keys between the lines? Honestly, this transfer has made me think. My mind has gone mad. It's spiraling and searching for answers here, because Eddie Howe has a system and he has stuck to it pretty religiously since he signed for Newcastle. Is he on the verge of changing it all?
He could well be. I think the nice thing for him is that he does have options. He's got variety now in this squad, whereas over the last few years, particularly if they had a couple of injuries, it felt like he really, really didn't. And I talked about Elanga and Murphy and whether they're too similar. It does feel like Isak and Wilson is quite different from Wissa and Woltemade. I mean, the main difference maker in that is what Woltemade, because we don't really have that many sort of 9/10s in the Premier League. Like Kai Havertz is probably one.
No, like Firmino's gone.
Firmino's gone, but this is a kind of throwback to that. But what Bobby Firmino was so effective at was he wasn't rapid, but he wasn't terribly slow. But he got to adapt to a Liverpool side that weren't expecting too much originally, and I think that might work in Woltemade's favour. Like, I'm not sure whether Woltemade comes in having signed in the final 10 days of the window, having only got one season of top 5 league regular football under his belt, or at least exceptional football under his belt, and starts 30 league games. Like, I think you don't sign Wissa for, what did we say, 55 million pounds at 29 unless he's kind of expected to take up the majority of the minutes this season. So I think they're actually in a reasonably good position, and there is variety in that squad. I think there's an option that if you did want to play a more sort of 4-4-1-1, then you maybe play Joelinton as a kind of right-sided midfielder who's going to be able to tuck in as well, and you can alternate into a sort of 4-3-3 and kind of swing round like that.
You can use Ramsey from the other side to do the same, to achieve the same thing. More
exactly.
Or less.
So it does feel like Newcastle finally have a squad that can compete on all fronts, because it's worth noting that when at the start of the transfer window in about May time, Bruno Guimaraes was asked about qualifying for the Champions League in Europe and what that would mean for his squad. And he was talking about how the last time they were in Europe, they really suffered because they just simply didn't have a squad built for it.
Yeah.
Whereas this summer, I think they've lost the star player, obviously. They've lost the real world-class quality, and it might take a little while to bed in. But I think there's a strong argument that the squad is significantly stronger.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about 6 genuine, like if you count Aaron Ramsdale, 6 genuine first-team quality players have walked through the door. How many have they lost? 1 or 2, depending on your classification of Callum Wilson these days, based on the fact that he simply wasn't able to play very many games. So obviously, in terms of depth, they have bulked up. They have finally been able to do it after a very frustrating couple of years of barely being able to sign anyone. I know how that feels. I've just been through it
You're
myself in the summer. It's very, very frustrating. And they have used the Isak money in the same way. Like, it's basically like, do you remember when Gareth Bale moved to Madrid on the final day? And Spurs signed, between 6 and 8 players or whatever it was.
They don't look back on that fondly.
They don't, but they spent all summer sort of quietly collecting those players, and then there were suggestions halfway through that, oh no, these players are being bought in addition to Gareth Bale, which was a complete lie. But they got all the business done in, and then they let Bale go, even though it was telegraphed from June the 1st. He left it on like September the 3rd, or whatever it might be. Not far off here, because you've got a new goalkeeper, a new centre back, 2 new forwards, and you've got a utility midfielder / winger and Elanga as an actual winger. You've kind of given the whole squad a lift, a bit of a facelift, and you've only lost 1 key player. Now, it does happen to be one of the best 5 strikers in the world, and have replaced him in part with a player we have huge question marks over, but that European campaign is very, very, very tough to balance, especially when you play at the intensity that Newcastle play at. And my criticism of Eddie Howe over the last couple of years has really only been one-fold, and it's you're unable to adjust for the calendar. because your style is so intense. As soon as Newcastle dip by 10% in terms of intensity and physicality, they actually look 50% worse. It's amazing how if they're not quite at it, they are half the team. But if they're on it, they can beat literally anybody. It is obviously really difficult to maintain that rhythm and intensity if you have a game every 3.5 days. But last year they did okay, and the year before, when you referenced 22-23 with their highest points tally, that was also a Europe for a year where they were able to hit that intensity every single week. They've learnt their lesson, and we'll see if they're basically going to try and go head first and try and maintain that intensity again this season. It's still a little bit of a risk because the injuries could pile up, but they've given themselves an honest shot here. From a squad perspective, they are undoubtedly better. The question really is the loss of Isak and his quality so significant that actually in the end they come out worse because the goal scoring becomes an issue?
Yeah, I mean, he did score 32% of their league goals last season, and their next top scorers were Gordon, Barnes and Murphy on 9. You don't imagine...
That's actually not too bad.
Yeah.
Nine each in the Premier League, nine-ish.
It's not too bad, but you imagine that Murphy's not going to play nearly the same amount of minutes. Now Elanga's arrived.
Well, what if Elanga gets 12?
Well, exactly. Yeah. It could work out just about okay. Their results after European games last time out were really, really poor. So this is the last time they're in the Champions League. They beat Sheffield United, who were dreadful that year, 8-0. But they dropped points against West Ham, 2-2. They dropped points in a 2-2 draw against Wolves. They lost 2-0 against Bournemouth. They only scraped past Ten Hag's Man United, and they did beat Fulham 3-0 after a Champions League game.
Can you imagine doing whatever it was? Let's say it was PSG or Dortmund. They had a tough group, didn't they?
And Milan.
And Milan. Imagine a trip to San Siro or the Westfalenstadion, and you're absolutely exhausted, and you come back and it's like, oh, we're not playing Bournemouth, are we? Mate, can we postpone it? Like that.
For sure.
You have to prepare for this.
Absolutely. And their Champions League games, they've got a pretty difficult draw as well. They host Barcelona next week. They've got Athletic Club at home. They've got PSV at home, who I'm not as expecting to be as good because they've lost back at Yoko and Tillman and players like that. But they've also got to go to Marseille. That's a pretty horrible away game.
Horrid.
You've got to go to PSG. That's pretty horrible.
Horrid.
You've got to go to Leverkusen, which probably isn't as horrible.
Got to
but
go
still,
to Leverkusen and get something.
Yeah. And then I was also having a look at, I like doing this at this time of year as well, just looking at what is your most hellish month. And Newcastle's December, Spurs at home, Burnley at home, Leverkusen away, Sunderland away, can't even get my own team out properly, Chelsea at home, Man United away, Burnley away, all in 1 month. That is a lot of games, plus a Tyne-Wear derby thrown in there as well. It's going to be a real slog, but I do think their squad is in a pretty good position. What I would also say is really helpful is in this squad now is you've got a fullback in Tino Livramento, and we saw it last night with England as well, that is really comfortable on both sides, which is a really nice asset to have. Lewis Hall's going to come back at some stage as well.
He's nearly back.
They've got 2 top quality goalkeepers they could rotate in the minor cup competitions. Their centre-backs, they look much deeper. They are expecting big things of Lewis Miley as well, who's had so many injury issues. I've got a sneaky feeling that Newcastle will be absolutely fine this year.
So here's how I'd put it. Here's my assessment. We all agree that Woltemade is a bit of a dice roll here this season. It may prove that his second-year leap, to pardon the NFL terminology, but the season did just kick off. We won't talk about that because it was a terrible, terrible weekend of football for the Detroit Lions. But the second-year leap might be amazing. But the first year, huge question marks here. Physicality, intensity, adaptation, like late move, all that stuff. And the fact that he doesn't actually really fit into Howe's template means that there needs to be time here for Woltemade to find his groove. None of this will matter, and people won't focus on it anywhere near as much if Yoanne Wissa does the business. Because if Yoanne Wissa just goes up front and carries the can, and this team is better overall, then they probably won't miss that much of a beat, right? And if Wissa carries the can, people won't talk about Isak's goals because Wissa would have scored them.
Yeah.
And they won't talk about the fact that Woltemade hasn't done this or hasn't done that or looks like a flop or whatever you want to say, because they'll probably be like fourth. And you know that their style in the way that they can play reactively means that horrible list of fixtures you read out, they're going to get a couple of amazing wins. And it could be any of them. Like Marseille, horrible fixture, but they could win it. Barcelona, I think they're going to win the Champions League, but I wouldn't rule out Newcastle beating them because that reactive style, that speed, that aggression on its day, it can just get the better of anybody if they're not prepared. So yeah, it's on Wissa. I think it's on Wissa, is my summary, because I like all the players they've signed. I think they've done a great job of lifting the depth and the quality of the squad, and they look better prepared for the season. But if Wissa doesn't hit, we'll be looking at this window in a very poor light. If Wissa hits, everyone gets time, everyone gets breathing space.
For sure. I think I reflect on the Elanga and Ramsey deals hotter than I did even at the time. And I liked both the deals at the time, just because they also seem to take the pressure off. And so many Premier League clubs this summer clearly went, we want the best Premier League talent. Like, we're playing at a different pace to the other leagues.
Yeah.
There's more pressure. You kind of need to hit the ground running. And if you're taking a punt on a 23-year-old in Woltemade, I say punt, but it is basically a punt at this level.
It's a bit punty, yeah.
There's just such a nice guarantee of Elanga, who seems like a very seamless fit for the style as well, in Jacob Ramsey, who we've seen be one of the most exciting players in the Premier League. You know, I think he was a Young Player of the Year nominee a few years ago prior to injuries and before Morgan Rogers' amazing emergence onto the scene as well. Newcastle look good in terms of their squad right now. Of course, we need to see how it plays out, but I'm reasonably confident that they could challenge again for that 5th Champions League spot, because given the financial spending in the Premier League this summer, it would be very, very embarrassing if you don't finish with 5 spots.
That's very true. Yeah, we'll have to see. Right, the 2 questions are, did they get better, yes or no?
I think they did.
Okay. I think I agree, but only if Wissa hits. Jack, do you have an opinion?
I do. I think they've got stronger. I think that you look at it from a perspective of the strikers just alone. Look, I think the rest of the squad has got stronger.
No doubt.
No doubt whatsoever.
No
like Malick Thiaw coming in, I think is a really, really good addition. I think that's really smart. And I think that, as you said earlier, Jacob Ramsey coming in and just being a kind of Joe Willock but can stay fit is huge in terms of
stay fit has an asterisk.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. But with a higher ceiling as well,
for
right?
Sure.
If you look at it and say, let's say that Alexander Isak is a 9 out of 10 striker. Yeah, let's just call it that for the posterity of it where it is. And we say that for Newcastle United, Callum Wilson was probably a 5 last year, and that might be generous. That might be generous.
Yeah.
I would say that you're looking at Yoanne Wissa as a pretty middle of the road 7.5 out of 10.
He's a minimum
Maybe
7.
That's minimum 7, and you're not going to get below that, I don't think. And Woltemade has the potential to be loads of stuff. But he could be an 8 out of 10. Have they got considerably worse if they have those options to be able to do it? I don't think so. If you add those 2 things together, you work it out in the aggregate. Woltemade is a question mark. I think the Wissa is less of a question mark. I saw this, I think it was Chris Waugh in the Athletic, basically saying that Wissa is the pedigree to Woltemade's potential. And I thought it was a really nice phrase, really nice turn of phrase. But I think it gives them, as you said, Sam, scope to let that play out.
Yeah.
And let them experiment and see what that looks like.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very good place to be.
Because if in the first couple of months, Eddie Howe says, okay, Woltemade's not ready, it's gonna be months here until he can genuinely get up to speed, then you're looking at an emergency situation of Yoane Wissa is the striker, we're sticking with the front 3, and you've got Elanga on one side, and you've got Barnes or Ramsey on the left, or Gordon on the left, or if Wissa's not available to play, then Gordon will play up front. So Gordon will just step in up front, which is a further mechanism to relieve the pressure on Woltemade. And purchasing Jacob Ramsey then obviously allows you to do that with Gordon. So from one perspective, all of this looks like a giant panic because Yoanne Wissa is 29 and costs too much and Woltemade is an unknown. From a different perspective, they've actually covered themselves off with plan A, plan B, plan C quite well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's taken me a little while to figure it out over the course of the summer. And it's taken me a little while to shake off the visions of the first 2 months. They were dreadful. They got stonewalled by 8 different players and the fans were going mad, rightly so. It was the worst summer ever for 87 days until things really kind of got going on the striker front. But they've come out of it looking okay. I really can't escape that idea.
Yeah. And also, if they'd ended up with Wissa and Strand Larsen, they feel more stylistically similar than Wissa and Woltemade.
Any striker is more stylistically similar than Woltemade, though. He's barely a striker.
But it just does feel like they've just for the first time in a while got options in their squad. They've got different systems they could play. They've got depth on their bench. And look, we'll see how this Champions League campaign affects them. They do have some really difficult fixtures, but I'd be very, very surprised if they weren't top 6.
Yeah, me too. I think so. Right, I think that's about it. Dougie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much, Sam.
Jack, thank you for watching over us.
You're very, very welcome, Sam. It's always a pleasure.
And to you, the beloved listener, thanks for listening. I guess we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much for watching this first episode of The Truth on my channel. Hope you guys made sense of the fact it was a little bit podcasty. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, leave a comment with your thoughts about Newcastle this season, subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you next time.